Okay, welcome back. We are here in Spencer's kitchen. Spencer is also in his kitchen.
I am.
Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
And we are cooking delicious Ethiopian food.
Correct. Yeah, we're gonna do it.
Can you tell us what the official names of these dishes are?
Yes, I think. So the lentil dish is called Misr. That's Misrwat. And then the kale dish or the greens dish is called Gomen.
Very nice. Do you have any idea what a wat is?
My prediction is that it means food. But I would guess I'm probably wrong.
Maybe we'll look that up.
So for the historians or people that actually care, I would love some feedback.
Yeah, please let us know. All right, so hopefully everyone has their ingredients and everything out ready. We're starting with, we just need a chopping board, a sharp knife, and we're going to prep.
Exactly.
So what are we going for first?
Cool. So when I cook, I really like to have everything right out in front of me. I think this is just the easiest. Then you don't have to be stressed thinking about what you need. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is make sure that the pan gets nice and hot, because I'm going to throw the onions right in there right away, and they're going to simmer for a little bit. If your stove is anything like mine, it might take a little bit to heat up. So I'm going to turn that on right away, and it's just going to be on a nice medium heat. The arrangement of the stove actually can be kind of important here. I'm going to do my rice up here. That's just going to be sort of doing its own thing. The lentils I'm actually going to put on the back burner, because while they're simmering and becoming delicious, that's when we're going to do the greens dish. So just kind of make sure, if you have your own relationship with your stove, know where you're going to put things.
So we've got the big pan on medium heat.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep, that's
But
right.
if you've got a gas stove, there'd be no need to put that on now. This is just for those of us with slow electric hobs.
Exactly. So I'm going to start with doing the red onions, not the white onions. That's going to be for a little bit later. And I don't know if people sort of have their own ways of chopping onions, if that's even a thing.
Are we dicing or slicing?
I'm going to slice. Okay. I have made this before where I've diced. That's perfectly fine. But I kind of like the onions to be in strings in the dish. I think it makes them a little bit more present in there and gives it a little bit more variety.
Nice.
So it's not just lentils. Yeah. So the way that I do that, I like to do it as thin as possible. And this is not a professional tip, because I probably am going to cut my fingers. But I just start right now down the side like this.
So please do not watch while you're chopping your onions.
Yeah,
That's
don't do that.
Important. So while you're chopping, can you tell us a little bit of the background about this dish? Because I imagine Misr is not in most people's standard repertoire of meals. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being differential. But how did you come across it?
So I, a few years ago, was sort of wanting to expand, well, I guess reduce my diet to be more vegetarian and try to eat less meat, and becoming sort of more creative in that regard. And so I was doing a lot of, tinkering with some lentil dishes and with some new cuisines. And Ethiopian was something that sort of jumped out to me right away. I was like, oh, I've never known that. Where I'm from in the States, Minneapolis, there's a pretty big Ethiopian community, actually. So there was some Ethiopian restaurants that I used to frequent when I lived there, and I always really liked the cuisine and was always sort of thinking if it was something that I could do myself. And so lo and behold, I did a little bit of research and found a lentil dish that looked pretty easy and pretty simple. I was really excited by the Burberry seasoning. I was able to find that at the local spice store. And yeah, that's sort of how I came across it. And it was just something that blew my mind, like the very first time that I ever made it.
Where was that? When was the first time you made it?
This probably was like 5 years ago, honestly.
When you were still in the States?
I was still living in the States at the time. And yeah, it's like something that I've just carried with me. And like, I've made it for people, for friends. It's just like a really nice, really easy, uncomplicated dish that it like produces a really solid flavor. And like everybody that I've served this to like wants the recipe or wants to do it. So I think that makes it a little bit more fun to share as well.
Yeah, in fact, I did ask you for the recipe, and you were even nice enough to give me some of the Burberry spice, and then I very rudely used it in a ton of other dishes. I never cooked it.
Well,
so finally, I am learning how to cook it.
Exactly.
I'm excited about that.
Yep.
Yeah, Spencer and I are in an album group together. It's basically like a book club, but for albums. And given that we usually meet in the evening, it's not uncommon for whoever's hosting that month's album to cook us a dish. So that's where he cooked this for us before.
Yeah. All right. So your eyes are watering. The onions are done. Whew. Here's where your cooking fat's going to come in handy. Like I said, I'm going to use coconut oil. Feel free to use any oil though. Canola oil I can recommend. Olive oil would work, but I do think that brings like a different flavor into the dish. You can use butter, but if you're vegan, coconut oil is sort of a great substitute. And I'm just going to cover the bottom of the pan.
How much is going in there, do you think?
I put in about 2 teaspoons, I would say. I would reckon. Yep. But really, you just want a nice, oil to fry up the onions in, because they're going to be in there for a little bit. Hopefully, this is like warm enough. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the onions, put them in there, and I'm just going to leave them in there for like a solid 5 to 7 minutes.
Yeah.
We kind of want them to fry up and become a little crispy. I think that adds like a really nice flavor.
That is a perfect onion going into a pan sizzle. You don't want it any stronger than that.
Basically Jamie Oliver.
He's got a lot. Oh, the smell of the coconut oil is really good.
Yeah, that is a great smell. Yeah, so like I said, I'm going to make sure that they get all coated and nice in there.
So just breaking them up with a spatula a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so you got that going on.
Nice.
Exactly. And then I'm just going to leave it chill. Again, on about medium heat. I'm not going to worry about it.
Covered?
I'm going to cover them. You don't have to, though. So now I'm going to chop the garlic and the onions. And everybody has, I think some people find chopping garlic to be really annoying. I don't. I think it's actually kind of fun. I'm starting here by just chopping off the ends. And I think in the other video, you've already seen this technique. It's a good technique to sort of press the garlic cloves with your knife. And what this does is releases the skin so you can peel them really easily. So not too much. I'm just going to give them a little pressing, and then I'm going to peel them. If it didn't really work, you kind of might have to finagle it around, but it should just really peel off really easily.
And then we're going for thin slices of garlic, is that right?
Yep. You can mince it.
I have to confess, I'm pretty lazy when it comes to garlic, and often when it says thinly sliced, I will mince it or grate it. I actually generally grate it with the zesty, like the thinnest side of the cheese grater.
Yeah, I think I've never actually done that.
It's a top lazy tip, but then you have to wash the entire cheese graters.
Ooh, that sounds like even more work.
It's extra work.
Yeah,
it is.
So yeah, like I said, you can mince it. I do not recommend doing a garlic press. You kind of want bigger cloves of garlic because we're going to throw them in with the onions, and they're going to serve this purpose in the dish of being an aromatic. So thinly sliced as much as you can, but don't stress out too much about getting it too thin.
So are you generally the cook in your household? Or?
I am, yeah. I really, cooking for me has become, especially since moving to Berlin, like very much a hobby. I think it's what I use to sort of relax at the end of the day. I usually put on some music and just sort of find a lot of contentment.
Yeah, I find it quite a meditative, or perhaps not that far, but mindful activity anyway. Yeah. It's a nice way for the mind to kind of switch off.
Yeah, I read somewhere once that there's like, you kind of get this really nice sense of satisfaction like chopping things and like sort of working with your hands. And
I think a lot of us don't create things in our day-to-day life, at least not with our hands. Much.
Yeah, it was like in a teacher training thing that like we spend so much of our time like, teaching and thinking and really just using our faculties in that way, but this is sort of a nice counterbalance to that.
Definitely.
And that really stuck with me, so.
So you are chopping both directions there to get kind of almost what are they called, like dice?
Yeah,
Kind of
I guess. This is purely a matter of preference.
Yeah.
So I like to do this. I like to sort of have chunks of garlic in my food. If that's not your vibe, I would mince it really thin. If you like really thin strips, you can do that. Again, a big theme of these dishes is that they're really versatile.
Yeah.
You can play around and bring in your own sorts of things. Okay. So I've got my garlic chopped, and I'm just going to push that to the side for now. It's the benefit of having this really long cutting board. Yes, it is.
I am coveting it.
Now, I'm going to use my garlic. Sorry, ginger. It's not garlic. And I'm going to now give you a little pro tip here. I think the hardest part of ginger, peeling that, is like getting this sort of, the skin off of it. And you can use a peeler, just like you would a potato, but then if you have these sort of like knobby pieces of ginger, it's really hard to use with like that flat blade. So this is something that I learned a long time ago. You can actually just use a little spoon, and you basically just go against the grain and you just like peel the garlic like this. And the benefit here, I'll try to get it a little bit closer, is that you can really sort of use the natural contours of the garlic, and you don't have to worry about the peeler sort of getting in these like little nooks and crannies and crevices.
I have heard tales of this method, and I've never been able to successfully. Have I even ever tried? I don't know. But this is amazing to see it in action.
Yeah, it's really easy, actually.
Because I peel it with a regular peeler, and
Yeah.
I lose so much ginger. It's a shame.
Yeah, you actually do. So I really like this method. I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'll try to go as slowly as I can. If you're new to this method, I suggest that you try it, because it's always fun to try new things.
Unlike, no equipment required. Who doesn't have a teaspoon?
True.
You don't even need a gluten.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ginger is just so good for you.
So good for you. So fragrant. What a great thing. Just that pesky skin.
Yeah. It is difficult with the knobbly bits.
Yeah.
As you say.
But this is why the spoon method is excellent. All right.
So it is successfully skinned.
Successfully skinned.
With the spoon, and now how are you going to prep it?
So what I'm going to do is just, mince it. And you want here as thin as you possibly can, because when you eat the dish, you don't want to take like a big chunk of ginger. I keep mixing them up. Ginger is great, but I think it can be really overpowering if you take like a big chunk of it. So my style to do this is to try to chop really thin strips. And then I'm basically just going to take those little strips and like just mince them. Yeah. I like to do this with a big knife. I think having a really nice knife is sort of an essential element of cooking for me.
Yeah, my cooks so far have all had very nice knives, you and Taylor, and I really need to sort out my knife situation.
Yeah.
It's abysmal. They
can be quite expensive, but I think if you're into cooking or into doing things really quickly, it's essential.
Do you sharpen your knives, or do they just...
I do, yeah. I've actually taken it to like a knife sharpener.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You have someone that sharpens your knives for you.
Yeah, but I think he might be like a neo-Nazi. Weirdly enough. Like, I went and I was like, oh, that was so great. And then when I was leaving, he had a sign, like Rosie the Riveter, like, women, yes, we can. And it was like a man saying, we can too. I was like, probably won't be taking my knife back there.
Not bringing my business back to this.
No.
Yeah, that's no good.
So you can kind of see what I'm doing. This action with the knife, I find this works really well to get it really fine. And I have my hand on the top of the knife here, as to not cut myself, obviously. And I'm okay with like this. I'll bring it a little bit closer. This should be just fine. Yeah.
Great.
So just a little note about these two things. I'm not going to use all of these things to put in there. What we've already done is started to prep the kale dish. So I'm going to take probably about 3/4 of the garlic and 3/4 of the ginger and put them in there. And then I'm going to set the rest aside to put into the kale dish.
Very good.
All right. So let's take a look at our onions here. They look great. And yeah, you can kind of see here that they're starting to fry up. And I want them just, sort of silky, almost sauteed, or like fajita style.
Kind of caramelized.
Exactly.
Almost, right?
In a way, yeah. Yeah, they kind of have this like browning.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I want. So now is the perfect time to add this. When you're adding things in, I like to take the cutting board over there, especially with this dish. I'm just going to do it by hand. Sort of toss that all in there. Again, save a little bit of garlic. Only probably, I would say like a tablespoon. A little bit more than that maybe. And same thing with the garlic.
These are the smells.
Yeah, these are the smells that make us who we are. I give it a nice little stir, make sure that gets in there. And yeah, Grace just commented on it. You should be able to smell how delicious this dish is going to be already. So I'm going to leave that uncovered. And the next thing that I'm going to do is get ready to do the next steps. So I have my spice already measured out. If you didn't measure it beforehand, you can measure it now.
How much in total again? Is it like
you want approximately 1.5 tablespoons.
Okay, great.
Okay, so if you're working with teaspoons, it's probably about 4 teaspoons, I would say. So like 4 of these little things. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to set that aside, and then I'm going to take my tablespoon. I really recommend having these. Not everybody has these. These are essential for cooking, especially me. Something we didn't do in the intro video is tomato paste, but it is in the video link. And what I'm going to do is put that directly into there. Those things have been cooking about a minute, and I don't need any more than that. What we don't want is that the garlic starts to burn. It's not a huge deal, but I think you really just want to sweat the garlic, I believe, the cooking, the official cooking
I think
term.
that is a good term, for sure. Sweaty garlic is what we all want.
So what I'm doing here is just squeezing it in here, obviously, and I'm doing 3 tablespoons of tomato paste. Tomato paste gives the dish this really sort of nice base. It almost like thickens up the sauce. Okay? So I have 3 hearty tablespoons in there. And before I put in the spice, I'm going to mix it up. Sort of blend all these things together so you have this nice sort of tomatoey, garlicky, ginger mush. And then I'm going to put in the spices. Now, before I do this, what I'm going to do pretty much immediately after this is put in the broth. And I want to cook these just a little bit to sort of like bring out the flavors, but you don't need to do any more than like a minute, right? It's not a problem if you do more, but don't feel like you have to like cook them for a long time. Give it a nice stir. Yeah, it smells so good. And next I'm going to do my broth. So,
Very good clap.
yeah, you can use that for your video. Nice little measuring cup here that I use. What I'm going to do is put in 3 cups of broth. And a nice little rule of thumb, especially if you're using boxed broth, is that per cup you need about 1 teaspoon of broth per water. Okay? Mm-hmm. So since we're doing 3, there are 3 teaspoons in 1 tablespoon.
Does the
which means
measuring jug tell us how many milliliters 3 cups is?
Yeah, it does. So 1 cup is about 250 milliliters, give or take. Nice. Yep. So total, that would be 750 milliliters. Okay? 3 cups or 3 teaspoons of broth or 1 tablespoon. They're the same thing. 3 of these, 1 of these.
Oh, that's good to know.
Kind of fun. Yeah. I had to learn that when I moved to Europe and had to convert all of my things in my head.
Yes, quite right.
Yeah. So this is going to be more broth than water, which is going to be fine because I only have this. You don't have to mix it beforehand. You could even put the water in the dish before and then just mix in the broth. It's okay.
You do not boil your water when
I don't do that. You
I
can.
guess it's not necessary if you're adding it to a hot pan.
Yeah, I think, right. That, first of all. And second of all, like, these water cookers are not very popular in the United States. So I've never really gotten in the habit of doing that. But
I mean, obviously, with the tea obsession in the UK.
Correct, yeah.
I remember my couple of months in France during uni, and they didn't have a kettle in my kitchen, and I genuinely didn't know how I was going to boil water. Before I remembered that a pan on the stove can do the same job.
Gotta be resourceful.
So we've added the stock or broth and the water,
Exactly.
and then you're now just giving it a good mix.
Yep. So I'm just stirring it up, and this is where you really get that nice like soup. It should be really red, bringing out all those spices, sort of bringing everything together. Yep. So we're going to keep it on medium heat for now because we do want to bring it to a boil eventually. You could turn up the heat here if you wanted, depending on your stove again. And now we're going to work with the lentils. So, like I said in the intro video, these red lentils are quite small, which means that they don't need to be like soaked or anything beforehand. If you're using lentils like this, these are sort of like bigger discs. I think these are called Tellerlinsen auf Deutsch, or like table lentils, or plate lentils. Yeah, these are really nice. They have the added benefit that you don't need to soak them. If you did purchase them from like a bulk situation, like not from a bag, I would recommend rinsing them. Okay, I already poured it out and looked for them. Sometimes they can have pebbles in them, so just know that that's a thing. Okay, but I'm basically just going to toss it in there and give them a nice stir so that they're submerged. I'm going to turn this back down to like a medium-high heat. And then I'm going to cover it.
So you turned it up a little bit from what it was before?
I did just turn it up a bit. You don't need to really, like you're going to bring it to a boil and then you want to just have it like a nice steady simmer. But essentially, this is like pretty much good to go, right? Which is really nice, okay? So I'm going to check the time. I'm going to have in my head about a half an hour for that to cook, right? If it goes longer, that just means that the lentils are mushier, which is in this dish, absolutely not a problem.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's that. I'm just going to kind of keep an eye on it, like I said, with the heat. Maybe I want to turn it down a little bit later, but I do want to bring it up to a nice boil so that we can have that happen. So what we can do now is start with the kale dish. Am I moving too fast?
No, this is perfect.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to have that out here. And it wouldn't actually be a bad idea to start the rice now. This is always something, like, I think when I was first starting to cook out, I always like forget to do the pasta or forget to do the rice. If there's ever like a little natural break in your cooking, I always like to think, okay, what am I serving this over? Is it potatoes? Is it rice? Is it pasta? And then make sure that that's done. So to do that, I'm going to turn on my stove. And here's where I'm going to use these little cardamom pods, right? I like to, with my rice, just do a little bit of oil in the pan, right? And this just sort of ensures that the rice doesn't become super sticky. Again, it depends on what rice you're using. I'm choosing to use basmati rice. I think it works really nicely. You could also use like a brown rice. If you are using brown rice, that does take a little bit longer to cook, so just figure that in. And when
brown rice went on about now, that would be the perfect time.
Yeah,
well,
exactly. And so exactly. And what's nice is if you do the rice now, you can just turn it off and let it kind of simmer and do its thing. Yeah. So I'm just going to then throw in probably about 6 or 7 cardamom pods. They don't need to heat up at all. Like they'll cook when the rice was cooking. And rice, good little cooking rule is always 2 parts water to 1 part rice. All right. So I have a 1 cup of rice there.
That goes into the pan just with the oil and the cardamom pods.
Yeah.
No water yet. And you have got it on a heat, but it's not really warmed up yet.
Correct. Right? Absolutely. Yep. And now I'm just going to put in the water. So I did 1 cup of rice, which means I'm going to do 2 cups of water, or about 500 milliliters of water. Okay. If you like your rice a little more watery, you can also do like a little bit more water. Yeah, that's totally
Not
fine.
quite sure who loves watery rice, but yeah.
Some people do. I'm not here to judge.
It takes all kinds.
Yeah.
Hello?
It's my coffee pot. Yeah. So I'm going to just keep an eye on that. Again, I have it at about a medium heat. The thing with rice, it can like burn in the bottom of the pot, so you don't want that. And I always just like to make sure that everything's nice and
stirred up.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really excited about the cardamom. That's going to smell really good in addition to the flavors from that.
Excited about that.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is just an optional add-on. If you don't have cardamom pods, don't worry too much. But it's a nice addition. Yeah.
So we're actually doing pretty good. I am just going to take a look here. I see that my stew here is boiling, which is good. But I don't want it to keep doing that. If you do, the lentils may burn on the bottom of the pan. So just make sure that you have it at sort of like a medium-low heat. We're just going to let it simmer and let everything sort of do its job in there.
So the lentils bring it to a boil and then
you turn it immediately down. Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So we're doing good. We've got our rice on. We've got our lentils on.
We've got a beer here that you've not touched.
Yeah, we haven't. So little middle of that post. Our beer is a nice companion for cooking. Whoop.
It's an alcohol.
Yeah, we didn't have to say that on the video, Grace.
They can see it.
Yeah, that's true.
So no one calls us out.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think I love that Germany has alcoholfreies beer. And that's like a big vibe.
You still get the delicious flavor.
Mm-hmm. And with this brand, Beck's, you actually, you don't really notice that it doesn't have any alcohol.
And it's such a good, I think it pairs really well with food like this beer, actually.
Absolutely, yes. So, the next item on the docket is to do our kale. Mm-hmm. And for that, we're going to need a pan. It's nice and sort of essential if you have a pan that has a lid. And this is because when we cook the kale, we're going to have it sort of steam in itself to really not make the kale too soft, but so that it sort of steams itself in this little chamber and becomes more or less like fibrous and hard. Okay?
If you are using spinach, we should say at this point, you still want to kind of prep it the same, but then you wouldn't be putting the spinach in at the time that we put the kale in, right? Because the kale would need longer.
You can put it in. I think you're just going to have to take it off the heat longer. Yeah. So like with spinach, it's a lot thinner, and that steaming process happens in like 1 minute. So if you are using spinach, I'll tell you when. You can just take it right off the heat. With kale or anything more fibrous or hardy like collards, you want to have it on there a little bit more. So this is relatively easy actually because we've already prepped the ginger and the garlic. And the biggest thing that we're going to need to do now is prepare our spices. So I'm going to take paprika and cumin, coriander, either one or both, and some turmeric. And I'm going to put in some cayenne pepper. If you like spice, this is a great thing. If you don't, you can just leave this out. It doesn't really add flavor, it just adds a little kick to it, which for me is really important. So I'm just going to start by putting a little bit in my little spice dish here.
Can you estimate the quantities you're doing of these?
Yep. I'll tell everybody exactly what you need to do so you don't have to worry about it. I only put in like not even just a little bit of cayenne. It's not even that much. Yep. So I got my trusty teaspoon here. I am really...
Very spoon confused.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I'm going to probably do about a teaspoon of each of these spices, except the turmeric. I'm only going to do a half teaspoon of that. All right? So I'm going to start with my paprika. You can do it in whatever order you want.
Turmeric doesn't really add so much flavor, does it, as much color?
Correct.
And it is also really good for you. It's a really great anti-inflammatory. So
Yeah.
it's always good to chuck it in whenever you can, really.
So I have a teaspoon of paprika, a teaspoon of cumin and coriander. And for my turmeric, I'm just going to do a half teaspoon. So I got my nice little spice blend there. I'm just going to throw in a little bit of salt. I think salt you can sort of, do whenever in the process. I'm going to put it in there. I like salt. I think it makes things really tasty. I just stirred it up a little bit, so very similar to the Burberry spice that we used earlier. It's just nice and mixed up.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're pretty much ready to go now. I'm going to turn on my burner. I'm going to wait for that to really heat up.
Putting that on a really high heat?
I put it on a really high heat just because I need to do that for my stove, but you only really need a medium heat. This dish will actually go pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Because basically the steps are, we're going to put in our aromatics. So again, those are the garlic and ginger. And then we're going to put in the spices. And then we're going to put in an onion. And then we're going to put in the collards and call it a day.
Easy.
Yeah. So while I'm waiting for that to warm up, I've got everything ready to go. I have my onion here. And I'm going to chop that. And I'm going to do it in the same way that I did my onions for the first dish, which is strips or slices.
I find such an easier way to prep onions, I find.
Yeah, totally.
So when and how did you learn to cook? Can you remember when you first started cooking? Was that something when you left home for the first time and went to college? Or?
No, I really started to cook when I was studying abroad in Germany, actually, in 2007. I did my junior year in a little university town called Freiburg.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's very beautiful down there. And there I was like living in what's called a WG, which is like a shared living situation. And I really got along well with my flatmates there, and they cooked a lot and sort of just helped me, know sort of the basics of like student food. So like even really simple stuff like pasta and making scrambled eggs and sort of turning that into like a dinner and like less of a breakfast. And that's sort of where I started. And then I learned a lot of like the tricks. Like that's where I learned about my trick with the ginger and the garlic. And yeah, that's kind of where I came across it.
Cooking from Germans.
Indeed. They're good people to learn cooking from.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. All right. So we've got the onions now. And this is where the pepper is going to come in handy. I'm going to put that in with the onions in the pan. And you can put this in right away. You could put it in at the end. It really depends on how you like it. Like if you want like a nice crunch with your kale, put it in later. If you want it just sort of as a nice colorful contribution to the end product, you can put it in right away.
But for now, you're just prepping them, so removing the seeds.
Yeah.
Half them, we're removing the seeds, and then are they going to be in strips again, or do you dice?
I'm going to put these in strips, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think cutting, like I did that really quickly, but you can, I think like cutting peppers is actually can be really sort of annoying because there's a lot of this like white, yellow stuff.
Pith.
Sure, pepper pith. That's a fun word to say.
Pesky seeds that can be really annoying to get out.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to do really thin strips. Yep, go for it. I'm going to do really thin strips of the pepper. Mm-hmm. But again, this is a matter of preference. So don't feel like you can go too thin or too wide. You can do whatever you want.
Thin strips are good.
Yeah,
personally,
thin strips are good.
I don't like it when you get a big chunk of not completely cooked pepper.
That's true. Yeah.
So yeah, given that you learned cooking abroad, how did you find it going back to the States? Is the cooking culture there very different? Did you find it?
No, I mean, I think sort of the staple dishes that I learned in Germany, I was able to sort of take back and use in the States too. I got really into making my own tomato sauce, sort of playing around with that. That became really fun. Doing some Asian dishes or Ethiopian dishes like this. And for me, cooking's always been really sort of communal. I really like, doing exactly this. Just sort of hanging out with friends, cooking, enjoying food together, drinking beer, listening to music.
Yeah.
Sort of an ideal chill night in. Right. So I've done most of my work, actually. I've got my onions, I've got the garlic and ginger from the first round, and I've got my peppers. All right. Hopefully by this time the pan is hot. I'm going to kind of test it by that. Looks good. If you are vegan, stick with this. If you are not, I would recommend using butter for this dish because the original recipe calls for this type of Ethiopian butter, which is clarified butter. It's very similar to ghee. And that really, I think, blends really well with the spices that is going to go in this dish. So all that stuff. This is basically just spices on onions and peppers and kale, right? So the butter kind of helps it bind it in there.
Buttery greens, you can't
exactly.
Really buttery
Yep.
greens.
But I think this is also a great sort of butter substitute if you are non-dairy. So I just use my little dish of butter here. I have about 2 tablespoons-ish. And that's going to be just perfect for me. I'm going to take it and throw it in there.
It's a very satisfying butter.
Yeah, that was. Take out some aggression from the day. What I don't want is the butter to really sizzle. It's kind of doing exactly what I want it to right now.
Melting out.
Yeah, it's getting really melty. There we go. We kind of see some butter here, or some bubbles.
As if the smells couldn't get any good. Now you're adding melted butter.
I know.
One of my favorite smells of all
See,
time.
cooking's so fun, Grace.
It's just the best.
So this is perfect. I've got my butter in the dish. It's not over sizzling, but it's definitely melted and definitely complete. And what I'm going to do now is throw in everything. Oops, dropped a bunch of peppers.
Fine, we didn't catch it on camera. It never happened.
That's good. I didn't have to say that.
Nice.
If you're like me, you might drop some things on the floor. I use the 3-second rule, wash them off, throw them in the pan.
Washing them off is probably a step beyond what I
That is true. I mean,
we're on YouTube, so we should
exactly.
be very comfortable.
All right. So we got these nice in there. This is perfect. Use your intuition as a chef. I'm really into having people sort of cook the food that they want to eat. Again, if you like these really nice and well done, you can leave them on there. If you want more of a crunch, you can put in the kale next. Grace was able to find pre-chopped kale.
Woo.
More things on the floor.
Also, this is curly kale, right? I think there are 2 types.
There
I
are.
believe this is the more common. I have to say, my family used to buy curly kale solely to feed to our rabbit. And now I can't believe that we were not also partaking in this delicious, delicious green. Totally. It's really good.
It is. It's a really great dish, and it's really hard to find here in Germany. Grace and I were really excited that we found it.
Well, Germany's very seasonal, so as soon as winter hits, then it's everywhere, and they sell it in these massive, you can see, kilo bags.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got in right in time. It was the first day I'd seen it in the shops today.
Yeah. Also, don't be intimidated by this, the amount of kale. This is all going to cook down, especially when it steams, as with all greens, especially the spinach too. You have this massive load, and then you put it on there, and it shoop, and you have next to nothing.
So if you don't have it pre-chopped, it's really roughly chopped, right? You really don't need to be very picky with that. You can have really big bits. We've also got big stalks in there. I think basically It's all good. Put
Yeah.
it all in.
Agreed. Again, I think I said this before, my favorite part of this dish is it's super low maintenance and you don't really have to overthink anything.
Yeah, but look, we're cooking on 3 hobs.
We are.
Almost full.
So, I'm satisfied now with sort of the way that my onions and my peppers look in here. I think they've been in here, what, 2-3 minutes? If you want to squish your ones, wait 5. But now I'm going to put in the spices here. And I am going to let these cook a little bit. Because what I really want to create here is like a mushy, spicy onion pepper combo. So make sure you coat the onions and the peppers in this dish. It smells absolutely amazing. Yeah. I think it really, the first smell that I noticed was the coriander. Or like the coriander and the cumin. Really like nice, sweet. Yeah.
This is looking like a fajita mix now. Isn't it?
Indeed, yeah. Could be.
Beautifully coated.
Mm-hmm.
And the other two, they're just simmering along right now,
Yep.
yeah?
That's what's great. They're just taking their time, doing their thing. This, I would reckon, probably has another 10-15 minutes.
That is exactly.
And I'm just going to now take a peek at my rice. That's also coming along quite nicely.
Can we take a look with the lid off just so people
Sure.
can see how it should be doing? Very nice, just a low simmer.
And I actually would not recommend taking the top off your rice.
Yeah.
You really want to create like a nice like chamber of steam in there. Actually, all of these dishes sort of use that technique. Yep. Do we want to take a peek at the lentils too, maybe?
Nah, now that I know that you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
I've been slapped on the wrist and I've stopped him.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. Everything's
I
really
complied.
fine.
Yeah. All right. So this is nice, smelling great in here. Now would be a good time to add the kale. And remember that when we put this on, I'm going to cover it and I'm going to let it simmer and become soft for about anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes. Okay? I would err on the side of doing too much as long as it's watched, because you don't want it to get too sort of soggy, but you want it to be in there long enough where it's not as crispy and fibrous.
So there's no liquid in there, right? So it's really just the steam from the greens that kind of cooks it through.
Exactly. We forget how much liquid there actually is
Yeah,
already in plants, so just keep that in mind. Remember, if you're using spinach, I would put it in, cover it, and then take it off the heat.
Okay.
Like the heat from the pan that's like left over will be enough. Okay. Dump that in there.
Oh yeah.
Press it all down.
Can't even fit.
Can't even fit. It's a good problem to have.
These greens, they wilt so quickly that even if you think there's no way that's fitting in my pan, it will.
It will. And if you have some leftover, that's also fine, because you can just put it in a little bit later. Grace, you just brought up liquid. Just for good measure, I'm just going to coat them. Just a little bit.
Okay.
Maybe if you have some leftover seasoning or spice, you can sort of put them in there.
It's nice that you've managed to use that to get the rest of the spices out of that bowl.
Exactly. So I'm going to cover it. Make sure these are all kind of tucked in there.
You've lost one behind the pan.
Have I?
You can see that you can't other side.
Ah, yes.
Don't want him to feel left out.
No, we don't. And again, that's pretty much okay, right? Our rice is cooking, our lentils are cooking, this is steaming. I'm going to take a look at the time here. We worked out perfectly. So we have about 12 minutes left on this, 10 minutes of cooking on here. We can sort of take a little break, take a sip of beer.
Sip of beer, kick back, relax.
Mm-hmm.
We have got the yogurt topping to do.
That is
that's
true.
Going to be a nice.
That goes really quickly.
Relaxed affair.
So, for that, and don't feel like you need to be in any rush, now would be a good time to chop the coriander or cilantro, depending on where you're from. Some people take the stems off. I've never really found the need to do this.
No,
They bring a degree of sweetness, and it's just annoying. So, and you also feel like you waste a lot of it, right?
That's it. Chopping herbs can be annoying at the best of time, and I think the easier you can make it, the better.
Yeah, agreed. So this is also a matter of taste. I like to do mine really thinly sliced or chopped. Some people don't really do anything. They just sort of pull them off the stem and put the whole leaf on there. Perfectly fine. Using the same technique here that I did to make the garlic really nice and small.
Very satisfying sound.
Yeah. It's also a very satisfying smell. Are you one of those people that it tastes like soap? Like horrible soap?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I think if I had that particular affliction, I wouldn't have started to like it, and I really have as I've got older. I think I just didn't have it on the right dishes, and I've since realised there's a lot of dishes that it really works with. No other herb. You can't substitute it for any other herb.
You really can't, that is true. Just a little note, if you do decide to buy a nice knife, you never want to keep that knife wet. When knives stay wet, they lose their sharpness a lot easier and they can actually rust, which is bad because then the knife is ruined. So I always like to, when I'm done using the knife, wash it right away, and then I just put it away. Dry it off, and it's done. We don't need it anymore.
He's a man who cares about his knives.
I do. I think knife care is important. All right, we've got our cilantro. I'm going to, for serving purposes, put it in this nice little dish.
A nice dish. Let's use more of these nice dishes.
You don't have to do this, but I think I read somewhere. Oh, I should actually show you guys this this resource.
Love the resource.
It's called the Flavor Bible.
Ooh, so pretty.
And this is really fun because it's like, basically it's just like this encyclopedia of all of these different like foods basically. And so you can kind of see, it tells you like what season it's in, the taste that it brings into a dish.
Oh, this is great.
What it pairs really well with, so they call them flavor affinities. And so this is just also something if you're sort of an aspiring cook to know, you know what, I have some lentils. Like, let's see what I can do with those. You can put them with bacon, bell pepper, cumin, and garlic. You could put them with a bay leaf, onion, and thyme. You could put them with cumin and turmeric, like we're doing here in this dish. So
it does contain recipes, but it's more about what flavors work together.
Exactly.
As well.
Yep. Yeah, and just like even if you're like, I kind of had a really long day, I don't really know what to cook. It's really nice. You just throw some lentils and broth in a pot with some cumin and turmeric, or olive oil and parsley, or bacon, garlic, and vinegar.
Bacon, garlic, and
Kinda
vinegar.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay.
But in this book, the sort of beginning talks about how food sort of works on us in many different levels. So you have this visual component, how it looks, and I think this dish looks really beautiful. You have this emotional component, which means like while you're cooking it, you want to have fun, spend time with friends, you really want to enjoy doing it. You have this mental aspect. Obviously, we've done a lot of thinking, measuring, working with our hands, knowing amounts, knowing temperatures. And then you also have the spiritual element too, which is, I think, maybe a little cheesy, but also kind of cool that like if you've done it and you're cooking for people and just that really nice feeling of like enjoying the dish when you're done. That was nice.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and so what's fun about that and what makes the whole experience really nice is that you can really prepare those side dishes like that.
Yeah.
Even if you're just alone in your apartment, it's really nice.
Yeah, I think just taking the time to do little things like that, it might not seem like much, you know, putting things in nice bowls, and like you say, even if it's for you, that can go away towards really heightening the enjoyment and the relaxation of cooking, I think.
Agreed.
We should say, because we didn't actually before, although we'll have put it in the notes, but this, the quantities this serves is 4, is that right? Yeah,
that is correct.
And some people obviously might not be cooking for 4, but the leftovers of this work so well.
They really do.
That you really want to make it all and then just keep it in the fridge or put it in the freezer.
That's a good thing to note. So my rice actually looks good. Chris, if you want to just take a little peek here, you know when your rice is finished when like there's no water anymore, right? And if I give it a little bit of a stir, it might be a little watery. That's fine, because if I turn off the heat and then cover it, there's going to be enough like evaporation for it to be done. And you can also see you have the cardamom pods in there, and it just smells very faintly of cardamom, which is just perfect. That's exactly what you want. So I'm going to turn off the heat on the rice. Mine is done. I'm going to leave that there. You can see through the clear top of the pan that the kale here is like really getting there. Looks about done. On my watch, it should be in there for about 3 more minutes. We might have to do that, give or take. Just going to take a little peek and see if it's doing its thing. It is. And this would be a nice chance to give it a nice little stir, to really make sure that all of those things are really nice and mixed up in there. Some of that kale that was at the top gets the opportunity to go to the bottom. And you can see how much less volume it actually is, just like Grace predicted. It did shrink down.
Yeah, you could definitely have chucked a little bit more actually in.
Probably should have, yeah. That's okay.
That was enough for our purposes.
Exactly. So what I might do actually is maybe just put some more in there. It's totally fine to add some more. Like I said, you can't really overcook it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to add some to sort of even it out. And I'm going to keep that on the heat. Our lentils are also looking quite tasty. According to my watch, they've been there about a half an hour now. And that's exactly what we wanted them to look like. So you'll know when they're done when you sort of have this nice, mushy, soupy stew, right? It looks very good. And again, just as predicted, the red lentils here, they've really softened up. They're not hard at all. Your lentils shouldn't be hard. If you used red, this shouldn't be a problem, but you kind of know when it turns into this like slop.
Slop's what we want.
Finish. That's what we want. So I'm going to take that off the heat too. And I'm just going to let the kale that I just put in there sort of soften up in there. Maybe only about 3 to 5 more minutes.
Yeah,
and this will
be done quite the same level as the
right.
Other
Exactly. Yep. This is going to give us a perfect time to quickly prepare our dish. So here is, what do you think? 250, 300 milliliters of yogurt?
Yeah, it's about a cup.
Ish.
Yeah.
Yep. You can do as much of this as you want, obviously. This is going to be sort of like the dressing or like the sauce that goes on top of both of the dishes, and it's really nice just as like a balance of the sort of really spicy, intense flavors of the lentils, and it kind of cools down the whole dish. And then like also, if you put it on both of them, it's sort of like the bridge between the two.
Yeah, yogurt is a great topping
equalizer
for any spicy dishes.
Love it. So I have my cumin coriander mix here, and this you're just going to have to eyeball. So I've done a lot of this intuitively, and I encourage you to do the same. Don't overdo it. So what I like to do is just reach into the jar and use my fingers.
And people could just use cumin.
Yeah.
Probably would choose cumin over coriander if you only have one or the other.
I would say cumin is better. Yes. But I just happen to have a mix.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at amounts, what I'm doing here, I would say that's about a 1/4 teaspoon. Right? Not too much. And I'm just going to whip it up nicely, mix it in there. So that's that. Salt.
I noticed you haven't seasoned the lentils yet.
No.
Does that take any seasoning? Or is
They don't really need it. I like to let the people who are eating it season it themselves. The spice is so present there that you don't really even need any salt, really.
This is a point where at home you might want to taste it and see if you personally want to add some seasoning. Now would be the time to do that to the lentils.
So I got my yogurt mixture, salt, cumin. The very last thing that I'm going to do is put in some lemon. And this is like the final step of everything. If you have 1 lemon, which is what's on the list, it works out perfectly because you have 1 lemon for this, or 1/2 of the lemon for the dip, and the other half of the lemon is going to go into the kale. Perfect. So I'm just going to squeeze it in there.
I always get pips in when I just squeeze it.
I know, it's quite annoying.
Yeah.
I actually have a lemon squeezer.
Yeah.
But to not intimidate people, I'm just going to do it that. Don't feel like you have to overdo it on the lemon either. You just want it, you know, kind of enough to make this a really sort of liquidy, nice little sauce. Exactly.
And you can taste as you go. If you want more salt or more lemon, you can just...
I think it's perfect, actually. I might actually just want a little bit more...
More spice.
Yeah. Yum. So, these are my serving elements. I've got my cilantro, I've got my dip. And I might even, there's probably still some lemon left in here. It doesn't look very pretty, but you could also put that on the lemon, or the lentils, or the rice, really anything.
Chop it into chunks and serve it alongside on the plate.
Exactly. I take a look at these here.
It becomes such a more vibrant green.
Yes. Yes, they have. Perfect. So this is looking quite done. Grace just commented on the color. That's always a good indicator to know when your greens are finished. They become very bright, vibrant green, and that's like a good way to know. They could probably go longer if you have a little bit of extra time and want them a little bit more done. You can see some of the ones that have been here for a little bit longer are actually turning more of like a darker green. Mm-hmm. And I actually am going to recommend that we leave these in there because I want all of them to look about the same.
Yeah.
But that is totally okay. Yeah. So.
That's basically it.
Basically it. Yeah.
This is a really well laid out kitchen, even though it's small. It's got good bench space.
It does.
And you're right across from the hogs. It's very good.
It is nice. Yeah, this was an Einbauküche, which in German means it was like already in here.
This is what Taylor was ranting about all of last episode, not having, because it is not standard. But that was very fortunate. That
yeah, but I think it's quite old. I think it's been in here since like the 60s.
We've also got a great spice collection.
Yeah.
So this recipe might have encouraged people to actually start a spice collection, which is no bad thing because suddenly this whole wealth of dishes will open up to you.
Yeah.
That are super easy, but super tasty.
True. It's always nice to have. If you have the space or a little spice rack, that's what they're for. Just as far as serving goes, if you have like a really sort of nice wide dish, I like to use these because I like to sort of mix everything up and have them kind of be messy in there. Obviously, a nice regular plate would be just fine, but the downside here is it can get really sloppy and messy, so I would recommend doing a bowl.
Big bowl if you have it.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So I'm going to take some of my rice. Just a little note, if you did do the cardamom pods, you can leave them in there. If you do bite them, it's a lot of cardamom.
Yeah, it's quite intense.
So I would recommend if you can, just sort of picking through. You can do it when you're doing the dish. But as I'm serving it, I'm just going to kind of look through, see if they're in there. I don't see any. I'm going to take...
Oh, I can suddenly smell the cardamom.
Yeah, it smells really good. Give this a nice stir again. And what I'm showing you now is about one portion. In Ethiopian food, the typical way that they serve it is like on a big platter, right? So you have like all of these little sort of dishes.
Like a thali.
Exactly. And then you would typically eat it with bread called injera, yes, which is like a very soggy, sort of spongy bread, which is nice for sort of soaking up those spicy liquids and doing that. I don't think they even use cutlery, actually.
Yeah.
I think much like Indian cuisine, they're just used to using the bread. I didn't have that. I don't know how to make it, so that's that. I'm going to take a look here at my kale. It's actually looking pretty good. Even just those few minutes that I left it in there, the color changed of those. Yeah.
Ooh, it looks good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the bottom has been catching.
Totally fine.
Yeah. It doesn't influence the flavor.
No, not at all. You actually want it to be sort of a little smoky in doing that. And that does happen, especially since we let it steamed.
Yeah.
But don't be alarmed if that's the way that your dish looks. Okay. If you don't have any tongs, I would recommend getting yourself some. They're pretty great. And I'm just going to take some and put them on there. Absolutely.
Is this mine? This can be mine.
This will be yours, Grace. Sure.
I've called it. I've worked so hard making this.
You have, yeah. Supervising.
Yeah.
I like to, when I take the yogurt sauce, just put some right in the middle.
Yeah.
Because then you kind of ensure that it goes on everything. And then by hand, you can just sprinkle some coriander on the top.
Yes.
And voila.
Beautiful. Whoop whoop.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to eat this now because I'm starving. Good luck making it at home. Let us know how it goes. Guten Appetit. And thank you so much, Spencer, for letting us come and watch you cook.
Glad to have you.
Amazing.
Enjoy,
okay,
guys.
Bye, guys. Enjoy.